Find explicit formulas for sequences of the form A1, A2, A3, and so on with the initial terms given in 10 through 16. Number 13, 1 minus 1 half, 1 half minus 1/3, 1/3 minus 1/4, and so on. Now, the first thing I want to mention is that every number has its own specific framework that we're going to have to generalize to get the explicit formula. With exception to the first term here, if you notice that it's not a fraction minus a fraction, this is a natural number, 1 minus a fraction. However, we can think about rewriting this as a fraction minus a fraction, because even though 1 is represented as a natural number here, we can rewrite the number 1 as a fraction so that all of our terms are a fraction minus a fraction, and then we can generalize that to a formula. My next question is, which fraction do we use for the number 1 here? Do we use 1 over 1, or 2 over 2, or 3 over 3? Well, here we have a pair of 6s, here we have a pair of 5s, here we have a pair of 4s, here we have a pair of 3s, here we have a pair of 2s. So if we were going to write 1 as a fraction, it would probably be 1 over 1 minus 1 half. And that would be our first term. And this representation of the first term allows us to generalize the representation of any term. So now I want to generalize this framework. And to do that, we need to understand how these terms change as n changes. Remember, n is the index variable. So for the first term, n equals 1. And then for the second term, n equals 2. The third term, n equals 3, and so on. Now, if you notice for like n equals 5, and this is true for all n, but it's easier to see when you go out a couple terms to like n equals 5, we could see that the denominator of the first fraction is whatever n is, and the denominator of the second fraction is 1 greater than the denominator of the first fraction. So to find the explicit formula, what I like to do is I like to try to predict what the 100th term is going to be. Now, since the first fraction is going to have a denominator of whatever n is, that means this first fraction is 1 over 100, and then the second fraction would have to be 1 over 101. And now we can generalize this formula for all positive integers n. We can say a sub n equals 1 over n plus 1 over n plus 1. And that's the explicit formula. Thanks, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.